3 police cruisers came roaring down the dirt road, sirens screaming like they were about to raid a cartel hideout. And there I was, standing beside my moving truck, still holding the keys in my hand, while a woman I'd never met pointed at me and shouted, "He's the intruder!" My 15-year-old granddaughter was asleep inside the cab, and all I could think was what kind of nightmare had I just driven us into. My name is Nathaniel Cole, 62 years old, retired federal judge. After 3 decades in the courtrooms, I thought I knew what conflict looked like. I'd put away crooked politicians, drug traffickers, dirty cops. But nothing could have prepared me for Margaret Sterling, the HOA president who ran Lakewood Shores like her own personal kingdom. I had bought this lakeside cabin fair and square, every paper notarized, every fee paid. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place to raise Emily away from the noise of grief after her mother's death. Instead, the moment I parked my truck, this woman came charging down the road, phone glued to her ear, already summoning backup like I was trespassing on sacred ground. When the officers arrived, Margaret puffed herself up, fingers stabbing the air. "That man doesn't belong here," she barked. I pulled out the deed calm as I could manage, but my pulse was hammering. Then, one of the cops froze mid-step. His eyes widened. "Judge, is that you?" It was Martinez, the whistleblower officer I'd once defended in court when his own department tried to bury him. Suddenly, the air shifted. The other cops relaxed, the suspicion drained out of their faces, but Margaret, she didn't back down. She leaned close to Martinez. Voice dripping menace. "This is my community. I decide who belongs. Don't forget who signs your checks." I'd seen that look before defendants who believed power made them untouchable. She strutted off, but not before dialing another number, her whispers carried on the breeze like a promise of trouble. My new neighbor, Tom Bradley, wandered over. Old man, weathered face, kind eyes. "Welcome, Judge," he muttered, but there was something heavy behind his words, as if he knew what was coming. The very next morning, trouble found Emily. She'd barely stepped out to explore when 3 local teens circled her at the water's edge, jeering, shoving, telling her we didn't belong. By the time I reached her, Margaret had materialized like she'd been waiting in the wings. Now, children," she cooed, pulling Emily close, but her nails dug into my granddaughter's arm. "Accidents happen around lakes. Best be careful." Her smile didn't touch her eyes. That night, she was at my door clipboard and hand smirk plastered across her face. A violation notice, $500 because Emily's bike leaned against the cabin wall. I spent an hour drafting a reply that would have made any attorney proud, citing federal privacy laws, warning her never to photograph my granddaughter again. I hand-delivered it. She read the letter, lips twitching, fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. "This isn't a courtroom, Judge," she hissed. "This is my domain." I smiled, handed her a second envelope. A formal demand for HOA financial records as state law required. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. The retaliation came quick. One morning, I found all 4 tires on my truck slashed a note under the wiper. "Last warning. Think of the girl." Emily found it first. She crumpled into tears, clutching that paper, begging me not to let anything happen. I held her, whispering the words my late wife once used with our daughter. "Sometimes I get scared too, but if we don't stand up to bullies, they just keep winning." Still, that night staring at the dark lake, I asked myself, what if I'd been wrong? What if bringing Emily here had been a terrible mistake? For the first time in years, I felt powerless. I even thought about packing up, cutting my losses, but the next HOA meeting changed everything. Margaret sat at the head table declaring a new emergency assessment of $8,000 per household. Supposedly for security, but her eyes locked on me the whole time. I stood, voice steady. "Mrs. Sterling, can you cite the Colorado statute that authorizes you to impose this without a community vote?" The room went quiet. She snapped, "This is not a courtroom," but her voice wavered. And then from behind me a woman slipped a folded paper into my hand. "Meet me," after she whispered. Her name was Sarah Whitmore, a real estate attorney. On the paper a note. She's been embezzling HOA funds for years. I have the proof. That night, Sarah showed me everything. Fake company accounts, 200 grand siphoned straight into Margaret's bank. And Tom Bradley finally confessed what he'd been carrying 5 years ago. He surveyed the lake. Beneath it, rare earth minerals worth hundreds of millions. Heritage Development, a corporate giant, wanted it all, and Margaret's son-in-law was their inside man. Suddenly, it made sense. The harassment, the intimidation, it wasn't about me personally. It was about clearing out the whole community for a payday. Margaret escalated fast. An anonymous tip brought police roaring back this time to investigate drug activity in my garage. They found a plastic baggie planted behind paint cans. Margaret stood across the street, hand to her chest, fake shocked. Who would have thought a judge a criminal? But she'd miscalculated. After the tires, I'd installed cameras. I handed Martinez footage of 2 men breaking in at 3 a.m. license plates clear as day. Martinez watched jaw tight, then turned on Margaret. This is criminal conspiracy. For the first time, her smirk cracked. I could have stopped there, just kept my head down, waited for the law to catch up. But Emily, she was tougher than me. We can't run Grandpa, she told me. If we give up, she wins. Her words pulled me back from the edge. I wasn't just fighting for property anymore. I was fighting for my granddaughter's right to feel safe. So when Margaret called an emergency meeting to discredit me, I came ready. She sneered from the podium, calling me a liar, accusing me of spinning fairy tales about minerals. I stood, pulled out documents, contracts, geological surveys. Mrs. Sterling, I said, care to explain why your son-in-law at Heritage Development is negotiating to strip mine this lake? The color drained from her face. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and then Daniel Sterling himself stormed in, sweating, desperate. Mother Margaret, stop talking, he begged. But in the chaos, he spilled it all, 60% cut for her eviction of every family, total corporate takeover. The room erupted. Neighbors I'd barely met stood up shouting, chanting for her removal. And then the doors opened. 3 federal agents walked in, badges glinting. Special Agent Rodriguez stepped forward, voice clear. Margaret Sterling, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. For a woman who'd strutted like a queen, she suddenly looked very small. The same neighbors she'd terrorized for years watched in silence, then broke into cheers. I didn't smile. I just watched, heavy with the weight of what we'd endured. Margaret had tried to frighten us out, had dragged my granddaughter into her war for money, and power had nearly broken me. But in the end, her empire of threats collapsed the moment truth came to light. And that's the lesson I carry now: bullies only win if you let them.